it's not efficient to always have an LLC for every single property. So we'll group them. We'll group them based upon their value. We'll group them based upon the potential liability. If you have a single family home, that probably has less potential liability than a retail space or an apartment complex. So we may be able to put a couple of single family homes into one LLC.
So John, we often have our clients coming in asking about asset protection. How can they protect the assets that they worked hard to accumulate from potential creditors?
So let's start off with what asset protection is. It's the idea that we're trying to protect our assets from third parties. Who are those third parties? That can be a creditor from a lawsuit. That can be from a divorce. It can be from any number of areas. And people are concerned that the money that they have spent their entire lives building is going to be taken away with a single lawsuit.
So what kind of strategies do you discuss with your client?
The first and probably the easiest type of asset protection, or what we refer to as wealth preservation, is using what's called an LLC, or a limited liability company. This is a state-created entity that provides limited liability for certain actions that are performed within this LLC. So often we will put into an LLC real estate. Sometimes operating businesses are also held in LLCs. And the idea is if there is some liability that is created from that asset, slip and fall, bad contract, whatever it may be, this LLC is designed to be your first layer of protection.
And we often have clients who have multiple properties. Do we have all of the properties in one LLC? What do you normally advise your clients?
Like every attorney says, it depends, right? It depends on the value of each property. It depends on the type of real estate that is held. Commercial, residential, it might be an apartment complex. That can affect whether or not we put more than one property into an LLC.
So my understanding is that's important to determine the liability, the chances of liability or being sued for each asset. And how do you determine which assets should go into an LLC?
The perfect answer is you put each property into its own LLC. The problem with that for most of our clients is that can become quite expensive and quite burdensome. Each LLC here in California requires an $800 franchise tax fee every single year. There could be additional taxes as well. Tax returns must be filed for each entity. Separate bank accounts must be held for each entity. So it's not efficient to always have an LLC for every single property. So we'll group them. We'll group them based upon their value. We'll group them based upon the potential liability. If you have a single family home, that probably has less potential liability than a retail space or an apartment complex. So we may be able to put a couple of single family homes into one LLC.
Sure. You were talking about layers of walls, and an LLC is often thought of as the first layer. What other layers would be added to that?
Yeah, and I would say that's the first layer that we as attorneys create, but the first layer that anyone should have is good insurance. Make sure that you are adequately insured. Most people just think about the amount of insurance that they have, but they're not looking at what is actually covered. So it's always important to look at your policy and look at the exclusions and see what's not covered. So make sure that all the potential concerns that you have, mold, fire, whatever it may be, do you have insurance to cover those issues? So assuming that you have the insurance, assuming that you have an LLC that owns that property or that asset, another option is to create a trust. This trust, though, is not your typical revocable trust that many people have. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that having a revocable trust own certain assets provides some level of asset protection. It does not. It is no different than owning that asset in your individual name. The type of trust that does allow for protection is what's often referred to as an asset protection trust.
And I hear California is not really friendly to these asset protection trusts. Where do we cite as these asset protection trusts?
Yes. So California does not allow for these asset protection trusts. We do have to look to other states that allow for these trusts. I believe currently there are 19 states that allow for some form of asset protection trust or wealth preservation trust. We often will use Nevada and Wyoming as our go-to for asset protection trusts.
And what makes Nevada and Wyoming good states to have asset protection trusts?
Well, there are several factors, probably not going to get into each of them today, but certainly one of the biggest is the look-back period. The look-back period for an asset protection trust is how far back we can look when the person transferred the asset to the trust. So if a person transfers an asset to this asset protection trust this year, then Nevada says if you don't get sued for 2 years, those assets are protected. However, if you are sued in 12 months from now, the assets that you transferred a year before are now subject to the claims of those creditors and can be clawed back into your estate.
And certainly Nevada is known for not having income taxes. I would imagine that's also a benefit to have your asset protection trust in Nevada to avoid state income taxes on any income from that trust.
Yes, in the perfect world, that is the case. There are a lot of income tax rules, and where the income is generated is often going to be a factor. So, for example, if you have California real estate and you have that held in some form of Nevada asset protection trust, that is still going to require you to pay California state income tax. But yes, Nevada, Wyoming, they do not have state income tax. So there are times where you can put certain assets into those trusts, generate some level of income, and not pay state income tax on those.
Well, certainly lots to think about and a lot of strategies to implement when it comes to asset protection. If you have any further questions, please feel free to call us at Modern Wealth Law. Until next time, plan well, live well.